Thanks for joining us on the program today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the half hour. U.S. Navy destroyers and U.S. flag merchant ships have sailed through the Strait of Hormuz despite Iran's insistence. French President Emmanuel Macron claims Europe is trusted by U.S. despite ongoing huge rows between them. And 3 people die following a Hantavirus outbreak on a cruise ship now currently off the coast of Cabo Verde. Let's begin the world today. The U.S. says its Navy destroyers and flag merchant ships have sailed through the Strait of Hormuz, with Iran claiming this is entirely false. It comes after President Donald Trump said the U.S. would start helping stranded vessels out of the shipping lane, as estimated 20,000 seafarers on 2,000 ships have been struck since the U.S.-Iran war began in February. Earlier, Iran's military said it fired warning shots at a U.S. warship. The U.S. has denied this claim. According to the report, the Iranian Navy issued a warning and fired warning shots along the route of the hostile enemy destroyers. The Iranian military says U.S. destroyers turned off their radars before approaching the strait and were detected immediately after reactivating them. They add that another explicit warning was sent to the destroyer, saying that any attempt to enter the Strait of Hormuz would be considered a violation of the ceasefire and would be met with a response from naval forces. In the meantime, a large fire has broken out at Fujairah, a key UAE oil port, after it was hit by a drone attack from Iran. In a statement, the Fujairah government media office said civil defense teams are working to contain the fire. The report of the strike comes as the UAE Defense Ministry said it had intercepted 3 missiles launched from Iran. However, the Iranian government is yet to make any comment on the attack. Let's bring in now former member of the Israeli parliament and chair of the Oz party, Dr. Einat Wilf. Dr. Wilf, thank you for joining us on the program today.
My pleasure.
And I wanted to get your thoughts on the latest happenings as it concerns the war in Iran. We're learning that despite a threat by Iran to prevent U.S. ships from going through the Strait of Hormuz, U.S. Navy destroyers and merchant ships have been able to sail through. Do you think Iran backed out of its own threat?
Well, it was clear that this was a very fragile situation. It is known that essentially the rules of the sea determine the global powers. And the notion that a country like Iran can unilaterally decide that it's taking an international shipping lane that by all rules is supposed to be open to everyone, and essentially act like a pirate, begin to take protection and demand payment from those who travel there and essentially block it. That was not something that would be allowed to stand one way or the other. So this was expected at one point, and essentially Iran is saying we're going to hold the strait hostage globally, and the United States, I think correctly, is saying nope, that's not something that can be done. And basically the standoff can only end, I think, with Iran ultimately caving in.
But the U.S. is doing almost the same thing with the blockade on the Strait of Hormuz for Iranian ships.
Yeah, it's basically saying that as soon as, once Iran is holding the international strait, again, it's important to note, people are treating it as kind of a normal, well, what did you expect? They should, of course they are hijacking the strait. No, there's actually very, very clear rules about the fact that these things are natural and they should belong to everyone, and countries cannot essentially hijack them, behave like pirates, and demand protection money. So what the United States did was that as long as Iran is behaving like a pirate, hijacking this international waterway that should belong to everyone, it will not be allowed to benefit from that unilaterally. And again, either the world stands behind the notion that people cannot behave like pirates on the seas, or essentially everything breaks down.
The U.S. is reviewing Iran's new peace deal, at least the government said that much yesterday. This could lead to the end of the war. What do you think would be the element that makes the United States approve a deal like this?
In truth, I'm not really clear what anyone's negotiating on except just buying time, because essentially both sides have submitted to the other the conditions of surrender. So it's not really clear that there's much to negotiate here. But I do think that both sides were negotiating for time. And at one point, one of the sides will decide that they're not interested in negotiating for time. But I don't see any indication, and we're following it very closely, that what Iran, especially by now the Revolutionary Guards, expect to achieve, and what the United States expects to achieve, I don't see how they're in any way meeting.
Indeed, that meeting almost impossible to happen right now. That Strait of Hormuz again, it's an important shipping and trade route, as you pointed out earlier. The rest of the world is being impacted now by the blockade in the area, by the threats of Iran, and by the U.S. blockade as well. Should Israel then bear some responsibility for the conflict? Because the U.S. has not been able to establish that Iran is developing nuclear weapons, which is something it wants Iran to admit and then also denounce. And despite attacks on so-called Iranian nuclear facilities last year, Iran's still holding forth with its argument it is not developing nuclear weapons. It continues to withstand U.S. attacks and also continues to attack U.S. and Israeli military infrastructure within the region.
Kissinger once said a beautiful thing, I think, and very insightful about Iran under the Ayatollahs. He basically said it has to decide whether it's a country or whether it's a revolution. Essentially, it doesn't want to behave like a proper country that represents the people and participates in the international system, or is it a revolution? And as a revolution, it is constantly engaged in exporting its ideology through proxy armies that essentially avoid any sovereign responsibility in Lebanon and Yemen and Syria and Iraq. And ultimately, they bear responsibility for trying to export this revolution rather than behaving like a country. Israel would be thrilled. It's not just the nuclear weapons. Israel would be thrilled for Iran to just be a normal country that is not in the business of exporting violence and terrorism and revolution and now engaging in extortion globally. And again, it must be said, even in wars, there are rules. And the rules are you do not hijack an international shipping lane. It doesn't belong to them. The fact that they happen to be on its shores doesn't mean that it belongs to them. And this is not something that is a legitimate part of war. Israel, Iran, the United States, Iran can engage in war. But the fact that people are kind of just shrugging their shoulders at the Revolutionary Guards hijacking an international shipping lane and really behaving like 15th century pirates while claiming to be a serious state, again, they have to decide, are they a state or a revolution? Right now, they seem to be pretty much subordinating the state for the revolution.
I see that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is encouraging not only the IDF but the U.S. to continue with those attacks in Lebanon and in Iran. Well, some say that the U.S. has been lured into this war by Israel, and now President Trump cannot get the U.S. out of the war. What do you make of that?
The U.S. is a big kid, a very big kid. And if anyone has lured the United States into this war, and I will say it as a positive thing, it is the people of Iran. By courageously going to the streets, by demonstrating that there's a substantial share of the Iranian people who want freedom, who want their country not to be a revolution constantly exported. I think it became possible for the United States to imagine that finally the Ayatollah and now the Revolutionary Guard regime can be brought down by essentially helping them and reversing a terrible policy for years of abandoning the people of Iran, and even I would say backstabbing them every time they try to rise up against their totalitarian rulers. So I think this was the thing that really brought the United States into the war, the notion that the regime can fall. I still think that it will. It is now doing everything to hold on to power. And this is, by the way, that I don't see a negotiated outcome, because this Revolutionary Guard regime understands that they're fighting for their own survival. And they are fighting against their people. They're fighting against their neighbors. They continue to be committed to this bizarre idea that they have some duty to export a revolution. They're undermining the sovereignty of countries all around the Middle East. And as I said, the day that they decide that they're done exporting their violence and revolution and undermining the sovereignty of other countries, undermining basic global rules about international shipping lanes, once they just go back to being a normal country, everyone will be thrilled. I think not least of all the people of Iran.
Dr. Einat Wilf, thank you for joining us on the program and sharing your thoughts, perspectives, and analysis on the issue.
Thank you.
The United Nations is warning of worsening humanitarian fallout as the Middle East crisis continues, with aid route disruptions and food and fuel price hikes wrecking the lives and rights of the most vulnerable people. Speaking to reporters in Geneva, UN Refugee Agency spokesperson Carlotta Wolf says heightened insecurity and instability around key Gulf routes, including the Strait of Hormuz, are driving up prices of basic goods and delaying the delivery of critical supplies. She adds that the UNHCR has been forced to adapt to the situation by rerouting sea cargo and increasingly relying on alternative land corridors, leading to longer transport times and generating additional costs. Similarly, UN Human Rights Office spokesperson Jeremy Lawrence underscores the devastating and immediate human rights impact of the situation, and specifically of the lack of fuel.
Rising transport, food, and fuel costs disproportionately affect people who are already living in emergencies, including millions of refugees and displaced people who are among the hardest hit, while also reducing the ability of aid agencies to deliver timely assistance, while the capacity of some of our global transport providers has dropped from 97 to 77% from the start of the year. For some shipments, costs have more than doubled, such as transport costs for relief items from UNHCR's global stockpiles in Dubai to our Sudan and Chad operations. UNHCR's operations globally are only 23% out of the 8.5 billion that are needed. Means that each and every dollar that is spent additionally on transportation is a dollar less that we can provide to people forced to flee on the ground. The increase of fuel prices in Nairobi has affected specifically the availability of trucks for containers of emergency supplies that we were ready to send to three main operations that are there, Ethiopia, the DRC, Congo, and South Sudan. So meaning that people in dire need are receiving things already later than what's needed.
Let's shift our attention now to the European Political Community Summit in Yerevan, Armenia, as European leaders raise concerns about growing divisions within the bloc and their diminishing role in global diplomatic talks, particularly on Iran and the war in Ukraine. Our French President Emmanuel Macron says Europe is trusted by the United States despite ongoing disagreements between the bloc, adding that Europe is also respected and trusted by Iran. US President Donald Trump has repeatedly clashed with Europe and NATO over what he describes as their failure to do more on Iran. Meanwhile, European nations are not directly involved in the ongoing talks between the US and Iran, which are being mediated by Pakistan. The The European political community includes around 50 EU and non-EU countries, including EU member states, the UK, Ukraine, and Western Balkan nations. It is widely seen as the brainchild of France's President Emmanuel Macron, formed shortly after the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022.
Look, I really believe that when we speak about strategic autonomy, it was perfectly phrased by Mark in his speech with a list of sectors when we speak about strategic autonomy. It's not just dealing with defense and security and energy, but these components are critical than food. But now we have to speak about space, we have to speak about semiconductors and so on, because it's impossible to have a sustainable strategic autonomy on defense if you are 100% dependent when you speak about semiconductors to some other countries. So we clearly see, given the integration of global economy and our innovation system, that building and strengthening our strategic autonomy requires much more focus on these key pillars where we have over-dependencies. And we experienced the cost of over-dependencies during the past few years. In COVID time, when we spoke about masks and some medical devices, the Russian war against Ukraine revealed our over-dependencies regarding gas and Russian gas. We are experiencing the cost of our over-dependencies when we speak about the American umbrella in terms of defense and security. Let's be honest, this is the elephant in the room. But if Mark is here as well, this is because he feels more close to the Europeans, and because we are all together and we consider we have to be more united, because there is a sort of a doubt or a question mark when we speak about the fact that no doubt about the American solidarity on all these fields.
French President Emmanuel Macron, while staying with the summit, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky urged leaders to find one common European voice in talks with Russia. Europe has become increasingly divided and has also been repeatedly sidelined in negotiations involving the United States, Russia, and Ukraine.
Strong support for Ukraine must continue. Every support package matters, especially air defense. Every contribution to the Pearl program matters. And we need new Pearl packages this year, this May. This helps us defend against the ballistic threats. And I believe Europe should be able to produce everything it needs to defend against everything, all the ballistic attacks and all other weapons on its own. We offer a contribution to Europe's defense. Our drone deals, they bring countries together, and we need strong protection across Europe from drones and all attacks, potential attacks, and in the air, at sea, and on land. The drone deals mean joint work, joint production, shared protection. Let's move forward on this. And one more thing, we need to focus on what we will do if Russia does not end this war. We need continued pressure and we need peace. And of course, it's number one, we need to find a workable diplomatic format. And Europe must be at the table in any talks.
Well, the UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has admitted that some alliances are not where they want them to be, referencing relations with the United States. We're speaking at that summit where the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was speaking at. Recently, Starmer has been under intense domestic pressure ahead of an expected setback in Thursday's local elections in the UK amid an ongoing row involving a former US ambassador linked to Jeffrey Epstein.
What I'd say about this particular summit is that the backdrop has changed. We are now facing a war on two fronts. We're going into the 5th year of the Ukraine war, and we've got the Iran conflict at the same time. And both of those are impacting all of us in a very material way. In the United Kingdom, if you look at the economic forecast now and compare it to the economic forecast just 3 or 4 months ago, they are in materially different places. And this is going to play out with our electorates in all of our countries. The impact is not just economic. Certainly in the United Kingdom and elsewhere, there are proxy attacks going on, both Russia and Iranian, on our streets and by way of cyber attacks. So this is not something remote, it's very real. It's real for Vladimir, and we of course stand with him as we always have. But it's impacting us. The third way it's impacting us has already been alluded to, which is that we cannot deny that some of the alliances that we have come to rely on are not in the place we would want them to be. There is more tension in the alliances than there should be. And it's very important that we therefore face up to this as a group of countries together.
Now, tensions rising between Nigeria and South Africa over growing attacks on foreign nationals. Earlier today, the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Kimi Ebiyefa, spoke to reporters after a meeting between the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Dunoma Ahmed, and the Acting High Commissioner of South Africa to Nigeria, Lesoli Mashele, at the meeting that they had earlier, said that South Africa is closely monitoring the situation of Nigerians being attacked by South Africans, noting the South African government has totally condemned the attack on Nigerians and called for full investigation into, as well, the deaths of 2 Nigerians as a result of violent attacks.
The government of Nigeria is aware of ongoing protests in some parts of South Africa, requesting foreigners, especially blacks, to leave the country. Some of the videos are very disturbing, considering the friendly and cordial relations between the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the Republic of South Africa. Our missions in South Africa, the High Commission in Pretoria and the Consulate in Johannesburg are closely monitoring the situation and reporting timely to headquarters. Our mission in South Africa also reported the unfortunate death of 2 Nigerians, Nnaemeka Matthew Andrew Ekpeyong and Kelvin Chidebere, due to injuries sustained while in the custody of South African security agencies. To address these issues and other related matters, the ministry summoned the Acting High Commissioner of South Africa for a meeting earlier today, and the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Dunoma Omar Hamid, met with the South African Acting High Commissioner, Lesoli Mashele, at 11 a.m. During the meeting, the ministry acknowledged the recent public statements by the President of South Africa and other senior government officials, including the Minister of Police and National Police Commissioner, rejecting extrajudicial killings and the looting of foreign nationals' properties, and underscored the importance of translating this commitment into consistent action on the ground.
Well, South Africa's health department has urged citizens not to panic following the death of 3 tourists who were on a cruise ship that died of suspected hantavirus. Hantavirus, or viruses, are a family of viruses spread primarily by wild rodents through urine, droppings, or saliva, causing severe, often fatal respiratory or kidney illnesses, in humans. It can cause severe respiratory illness. Rarely it can be transmitted between people. The operator of the MV Hondios ship tour company in ocean-wide expeditions said a Dutch husband and wife, as well as a German national, had died. The cause has not been established. Animal lovers have taken over Bangkok, as the Pet Expo Thailand 2026 draws crowds from across the region, from dogs in strollers to cats perched on shoulders. The event, there they are, showcasing a vibrant mix of pets, products and passionate owners. This was held at Queen Serikit National Convention Center, highlighting everything from grooming and fashion to veterinary care. Visitors say the event offers a rare chance to connect with fellow pet lovers and discover the latest innovations in pet care. That's it on The World Today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.